Welcome all. I think I've got a bit of a confession to make, and that is that I suspect that I'm a bit of a gimbal tragic. And the reason that I say that is every time when I think I've got enough gimbals, I find a reason to get another one. Now all this started probably about 3 or more years ago now, when I've got my first Vautech A2000 to use with my mirrorless camera. Which worked okay, but wasn't all that flash. And probably about 6 months later, Vautech released the AK2000, and that came with a focus control motor and all that sort of stuff, and I decided to get that for the mirrorless camera, which worked quite well. Then when I bought the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, neither of those gimbals were suitable for using it with that, and that led me to the Crane 3S. Which I've been very pleased with, and unfortunately with COVID and all that going on, haven't had a real chance to put it to a great deal of use. But anyway, I think that's a reasonable, justified purchase. Then I started to look at doing video on the tracks and things when we do driving in the bush and all the rest, and obviously the Pocket 4K and the gimbal was just way too much to carry up and down tracks. So I decided to get initially a June Smooth 4, which broke on the first trip that we did, and so I replaced that with this DJI OM4 gimbal, and I've done a video on that earlier about some of the pros and cons of the gimbal itself, and I'll show something shortly as a comparison with the gimbals, but it was only designed for a mobile phone. And so when I got the Insta360, it comes with a fairly good bit of software with the IMU inside it that gives you the ability to stabilise camera movements and all that with the flow state stabilisation, and you can almost just with a selfie stick get some pretty good results. But I didn't want to sort of do that because I wanted to do a bit more with the camera itself in the situations that I wanted to film in, and I sort of really wanted to have another gimbal for it. And I just by happenstance came across some videos on the the M2, and I hadn't seen this before, and it's been out probably for a year or two now, and it's ideal for small cameras like the Insta360 with cage and all that, so it gets to the point and shoot style camera size weight, holds about 700 grams. And so I saw that on a pretty good deal and decided to get it, and it really actually has turned out to be a good gimbal. But before I get into the descriptions on this, I'll show you a short video that I took comparing the DJI, the Crane M2 and the Crane 3S over a bit of terrain that I've used as a testing ground for a while, and you'll see how they compare, and then I'll talk about each of the gimbals in turn after that. So there's no secrets here as to guess which is which. I'll highlight quite clearly the gimbals in use, and then I'll just talk about them after the video. So I'll be back shortly. Okay, as you can see, the DJI created some pretty awful results, and I thought that I'd done something wrong with it, and so I decided to go the next day and revisit the same scene with the camera and the mobile phone and gimbal, just to see if I hadn't done anything wrong. But unfortunately, the results were pretty much the same, and I don't know exactly why. I think that maybe in the walking situation, this gimbal just doesn't handle a fairly hefty mobile phone, though it technically should. Originally, you know, I thought, yeah, it'll do okay, but I suspect it's just designed for the vlogger and casual tourist and whatever to hold the camera up, do selfies and just video stuff while not really moving about. And I found another thing that I hadn't discovered earlier in the video is that you can't hold the camera or the gimbal down and get the gimbal to hold itself level. If you do that, it tilts, and that's to do with limitations. Then when you bring it up, it stays the same way, so you've got to double click to fix it. And the only way that you can actually get low level shots, if that's what you want to do, is to hold the gimbal sideways like that, which is not really a very practical situation in my view. So there's another little bit of a failure, design failure or whatever you want to call it, with the OM4. And as you could see from the video, the shaking was pretty horrific, and I was expecting a lot better out of it than what I got from that. Just hand holding, because the first time I did it, I sort of was holding the camera or the gimbal fairly low, or as low as it would go without actually having the camera tilting, and I thought maybe that was causing the issues. So the second time around, I went up and just held it vertically, just like that, and walked the same path that I walked with the other two, and still got exactly the same sort of juddering. So I don't know what's causing that. I maybe have to look at the motor strengths on there, but given that it just works fine, otherwise there's no real issues with vibrations or anything, I don't know what was going wrong with that. But I'm a bit disappointed with the quality of video that came out with walking, whereas with the Smooth 4, in an earlier video, if you've seen that, I could walk anywhere and everywhere, and it would stay quite stable. No problems at all using the same phone, but unfortunately the gimbal itself, internally the battery failed, or some circuitry failed and couldn't charge. So that was returned, and I bought the DJI. Now with the OM or the M2, this is a completely different kettle of fish. Absolutely quite happy with it, as long as it lasts a bit longer. It lasts as long as the Crane 3S, and I haven't heard any reports about it failing, so I think that's a good sign. What I do like about it is it's basically only 50 grams heavier than the OM4, so it's not a very heavy gimbal. So it means that I can use it quite easily up and down tracks and things like that, and coupled with the Insta360 1-inch, get some pretty good results as far as video goes. And the good thing about it is I can go and hold the camera or the gimbal right down low without interference. And I tried to use the A2000 rather than buying another gimbal, but I could only go to about that sort of level and height, because the ultra wide angle lens would suddenly start catching the arm. So that was a bit of a pain. Now this is actually really good, and it's one thing I do actually like about this is that a triple click will rotate the camera 360 or 180, which the DJI can't. So if you want to record high quality talking head stuff of yourself, very hard to do that with the DJI, as I pointed out in the earlier video. So that actually does quite a good job, and there are various modes. I'm not going to go into the modes and things like that. They've been done to death on YouTube as it is, so if you want to find out what it can do and all the rest as far as the features, go and have a look at one of those. But as you can see from the video, this was really, really good. And note that as I pointed out on the video, they're all shot at 24 frames per second. A lot of people who do gimbal shots go to 50 and 60 frames or higher and then smooth them out purely because of the slow motion stuff, whereas I wanted to show real time 24 frames per second and how they actually work. So the M2 works really, really well, and I've made them all into 2.41 to 1 ratio as well, so you can sort of get a comparison as to the visuals that I would intend to use for the video that I shoot. So I'm very happy with that. That actually works extremely well. It's a very compact, easy to put together gimbal, and it takes the Insta360 quite well. It takes my TG5 quite well as well, also, which is a 4K camera. And it's something I might use because it's got a 25 to 100 full frame equivalent zoom on it, and that can be handy sometimes, whereas this is just one fixed lens. But that works quite well, so I'm surprised at how well it did work, and it's infinitely better than the DJI. It comes with a phone holder, but I tried to put that on and balance the mobile phone on that. Doesn't work very well, so anyone thinking about using the M2 as a mobile phone thing, I would steer away from that. Despite the DJI wobbling, it's designed for mobile phones, and I think there are a lot of other gimbals that are designed for mobile phones. So if you're going to do that, get one of those. I wouldn't really worry about fussing with the M2. Now, the final video was with the Pocket 4K on the Crane 3S, using the strap that I spoke about in a recent video, and I just had the strap over my shoulder. I was walking with the gimbal. I had the little handle that you might see there on the side that I've spoken about before, that makes it much easier to lift up and put down the gimbal itself with the camera on. And I simply walked with the strap over my shoulder, sort of half looped like a bandolier, and I had the actual little handle on the side pressing into my hip. And as you can see from the video, that's actually not too bad. I think that's quite usable. It doesn't give that so-called mechanical, or whatever you want to call, thing that some people hate with gimbals, because it's too smooth. There's a bit of movement in there. It sort of looks natural. It almost looks like it was handheld because of a little bit of bobbing, but nowhere near the amount of bobbing that I was getting with the Flycam Galaxy Vest spring arm. So again, I've proven that the strap with the gimbal is infinitely better than the Flycam. So again, don't buy the Flycam. That was a bad buy on my part, but that happens. So that's a three gimbal example of what you can get, and or what I can get at least, in a very, very rough situation. And consider the fact also again that I was wearing gumboots there, so I wasn't sort of in any comfortable attire or anything else, and the terrain was very rough, going up and down a few steps there, which might be hard to see. And I'm very pleased, at least with these two, the June gimbals. They work superbly, and so I thought I'd put that out there for people who might be interested in various gimbals again, and moving with them, and the options that you've got available today. So on that note, I'll call it cheers.